You change the color of coffee by adding creamer. I'm interested today in discussing how we are saturated in America. What cities are best for us, and where are we concentrated at as a descendant of slaves and Black people? Not where the most Black people at, because you may have all these other Black folks from everywhere else from in the world, but I'm talking about descendants of slaves. Where are the most descendants of slaves in this continental United States? That's what this is, and that's what our discussion is about today, along with a couple of other things about why we have been deprived and hidden away from the American dream. Why it is so hard for us to get our feet planted. Why is it so hard for us to get our prosperity moving in the direction it's supposed to move in? It is difficult for us to do that when we got to fight every step of the way. So today, with my co-host, the Honorable Mr. Claude Foster, we will be discussing where Black people are today and what we need to do to get us in one place. So I want to welcome you to another episode of the Black News Network with Mr. Claude Foster.
Good afternoon, my brother. Glad to be with you on this nice sunny afternoon. Sunday afternoon.
It's a beautiful day.
A beautiful day. I look forward to the discussions about Black people.
Okay. All right. So thank you for joining the Black News Network. We are the voice of the real Black America. The indigenous people, the ones that were here before they got here and took our land from us. This is a recording, and it's a live recording. And if you're interested in joining the conversation, don't hesitate to join us on Facebook. Don't hesitate to join us on YouTube and make your comments heard, because your voice is the reason we're here. We want to make sure you know what's really going on in the U.S.A. So with that, I want to open the discussion by saying there are only 10 major cities that we really have a good concentration in. And the one that you wouldn't think would be ours is ours. We have more Black people and we make more money in this particular city than anywhere else in the country today. And what do you think that is? No, it's not Houston. And it's definitely not San Antonio, Texas. It is Washington, D.C. Now, Claude may have something different on the subject, but for as I see it, that's where we are. And we're going to discuss this today. And I definitely want to know his opinion on where we are and what we need to do to change. We definitely need those reparations that you were talking about, Brother Claude. So bring us on in and tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I mean, the subject today is talking about looking at the wrong thing. Talking about reparations and talking about where Black people are.
Mm-hmm.
Without reparations, I think every other discussion is mute.
Yes, it is.
But
so what are Black people though? What do you mean Black people? Who are the Black people you talking about?
The Black people that I resign myself to acknowledge as subject matter are the African descendants, the American descendants of slavery. Those are the Black people I'm talking about. I mean, we can have discussions about who the Native Americans are, who came here first, but in discussions that I like to have with politicians and people is American descendants of slavery. That's a finite definition.
Mm-hmm.
Was your descendant a slave?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a descendant of that slave?
So I'm Black if I'm from Haiti. I'm Black if I'm from Jamaica. I'm Black. Even Black from Puerto Rico. Even Black from Mexico.
I'm Black from Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone. Yeah.
But that doesn't erase the fact that I am an American descendant of slavery. So in the political construct of America, remember, this is an American construct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in the American construct of slavery of America, in terms of how this country was created, I am an American descendant of slaves.
Mm-hmm.
I was brought here.
So in order for us to even talk about reparations, you got to be able to trace your legacy back. And if you are not able to go trace your legacy back to a plantation, I mean, before the Civil War, where were you before the Civil War?
Well, it's easy to trace your lineage back. If on your birth certificate you got colored, Negro, African American, you got any of those adjectives, you're an American descendant of a slave.
So people from Haiti don't have the same thing?
If they got that designation on their birth certificate in their family.
Yeah, they're descendants of slaves, but they're from another country though. I've never seen a Haitian birth certificate.
I'm saying an American descendant of a slave.
Okay.
We're talking about America, not Haiti, not anywhere else in the world, not Puerto Rico, not any of the islands, because we know slaves were brought there. And those countries would deal with how their slaves were treated within their country.
So
Brazil. I'm talking
you had to get the 14th Amendment though to get you recognized though. That's what you're telling me.
What I'm telling you is that in talking about the American Negro, the American colored person, the American African American, you are talking. Those are descriptives, adjectives to describe an American descendant of a slave.
Okay. I like the way you put that. Those are exactly what you said. They are adjectives.
Right.
So how can an adjective be a nationality? It can't. So,
an adjective is not a nationality. It's an effort on the part of some well-meaning leadership to make us whole, to give us meaning.
But it doesn't give us any. You're an adjective. An adjective, I have to look up the definition of an adjective, but an adjective describes a noun. So we're not really we're describing a noun. So I think that's what an adjective is. It describes a noun. So the noun of the adjective is whatever nationality we supposed to be that we had to be somebody before we became American.
Yeah, but America's not going to put on your birth certificate. I don't know of any black person in America's birth certificate that says African.
Even Africans don't call themselves Africans.
But one thing, I'm talking about the descendant of a slave. Mm-hmm. The generations beyond slavery.
So before the Civil War ended.
Before the Civil War ended, when the first census was taken, I think in the 1700s. Mm-hmm. When was the first census taken? I had it written down.
Mm-hmm. But so before the first census was taken, it was after the war ended, right?
I don't remember the exact. I used to have that date.
Well, let's go back to when the Civil War and when the Emancipation Proclamation, so-called, was authorized. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not law. So emancipation is a formal document, and proclamation is a formal announcement. So nothing about it really gave us the freedom that we think we got from the Emancipation Proclamation. So all this Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves is not exactly what we portray it to be, or have been misled to believe it to be here in this country, because it's not what it says. The Constitution itself says all men are created equal. It didn't say all white men are created equal, all black men are created unequal. It says all men are created equal. So with the Constitution, the original Constitution, without an amendment saying that, why would the 14th Amendment be so vital to us being free if the Constitution says all men are created equal? Who decides that there's a difference between white men and black men? There's no difference. Men are men. So when the Constitution says that all men are created equal in its original context, then the 14th Amendment don't change what the Constitution was, what the Constitution said. It said it on several different occasions. The Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, all says all men are created equal.
But at the time of the writing of the Constitution, we were slaves.
Yeah.
So we weren't men.
But that's a technicality.
Well, it's not a technicality. I mean,
it is. How can it not be? It says it itself. Even though we had no classification. Who says we were slaves? There's no document that labeled us as a slave. It says we were slaves, but they called us slaves. But what officially states that we were slaves? We were help that didn't get paid.
No,
we were in prison.
No,
we were in bondage. We were
property, my brother.
Yeah,
property.
They called us property, but we were really you cannot call a living human property. So the names that they could put property, they could put my slave, they can call us niggas, anything they wanted to, but that did not really, you can't define what God created as a property, as it belongs to you. It didn't belong to you. So how you gonna call us slave? How you gonna call us niggas? How you gonna call us Negro? You can't give us black people or African American. You cannot classify a man anything other than a man. God created Adam as a man, and Eve. There's no in between. There's no, we're gonna create the niggas over here on this side of the garden and the white folks over here on this side of the garden. There wasn't none of that. Man was created, and the Constitution was written the same way. It was written to say that we are men. Nobody can change that. Men, the white man couldn't change who we were, even though we were in bondage. We were in prison and we were forced labor. That's what we were. That's all we were, forced labor. They can't call us anything else. But we've taken the title of slave as if that's a badge of honor. But to label us as a slave and us to accept us as a slave, then that's where the problem lies. Accepting the fact.
So who did the Emancipation Proclamation free?
What did it do?
Yeah.
The Emancipation Proclamation was an executive order, just like Trump's right now, this executive order. It can be revoked by any following president. And I won't be surprised if Donald Trump comes along and says the Emancipation Proclamation is null and void. He's null and voiding everything else. He can do that, but then it don't change our status as men again, because the Emancipation Proclamation only gave them a way out of holding us hostage, because they were saying holding us hostage was wrong, making us work for free was wrong. But we're the ones who accepted the label of slaves, and we're not a slave. We were never slaves. We were held in bondage and tortured and beaten and murdered and killed because somebody put us in that particular position. But we were never a slave. Never. We were just held in a position where we couldn't get out of. That's what the problem was. We were taken from Africa. We were put in a position to work, and we were made to work for free.
Well,
so anybody made to work for free is called a slave. So what do you call a prisoner who he's not working for free now? He's working for $1.25 an hour maybe, but he's still not. Huh?
I hear what you're saying, but I think in the context of this discussion, would you agree that the start of slavery was in the 1600s? In America,
yeah, I would agree that the start of slavery was in 1600. But in 1470, I read in this book by Whitworth, Jack Whitworth, Indian giver, that the Moors owned property in the United States, and there were over 10 million of them. And the Spanish,
let me ask you a question. Where were the Moors in the 1600s?
they were defeated by the Spaniards.
So they weren't in America.
They were still here, but they were pushed into bondage, into slavery, to be less than. They were turned into the Indians.
Where were they enslaved at?
Right here in the continental United States.
Okay,
Not just in our part, but in Mexico and Venezuela, all up and down the peninsula, the Moors occupied this territory.
But for the sake of our listeners, where were they enslaved at in America?
Here, right here.
By who?
In America, by the Spaniards, which were the Spanish. The Spaniards are white people. They speak Spanish, but they're white people, and they are the ones who transferred the Louisiana Purchase to the continental United States.
Right.
They're the ones who sold that to them for pennies on an acre.
So
that was the Moors' territory. The Moors were already there when the Spaniards sold it.
So what happened to the enslaved Moors?
The Moors were the Indians. They named. See, they have systematically created a process to eliminate our pigmentation of the people by turning us into Indians, by turning us into anything that's not black. Because they want to, the one thing that they want to do is make sure that you walk away knowing that black people don't own shit and ain't got shit in this country.
Well, it sounds like we're having two different questions. Sound like I'm talking about the American descendants of slavery, and you're talking about Moors.
Which we're talking about the same thing, but not the same.
I mean, we're talking about the same thing, but we're talking about two different systems.
On two different levels, yeah.
I'm talking about the American descendants of slavery.
Right.
That identified slavery in the Constitution, that treated us as 3/5 of a person, as property that had no rights.
Yeah. You're basing what you're telling me, you're basing every bit of your conversation on what the white man done put out there for you to use as a guidance. F that guidance. That is not the guidance that we need to follow, because that guidance got us where we are right now. We need to be following our own history and our own legacy and who we really are and what we really represent. Because what they have made us to understand who we are is not who we are. We calling ourselves descendants of slaves. We're the owners of this property. They took it from us. It's our responsibility to make people know that this is ours, not theirs. And if we don't ever stop using their lingo and their terminology and their description of who we are and what we got to represent, then we ain't never going to be able to think for ourselves, because we're following their doctrine. So their doctrine is what's got us screwed up right now.
So whose constitution are we following?
We are in America, so we have to follow that constitution, but that don't mean we have to submit ourselves to the understanding that they have. If we submit ourselves to their understanding and their constitution, then we are nothing more than what they called us and what they have classified us as, and what we are today. Nothing. We have no significance nowhere in America, even though we built this country. We've done more. We've done everything that that people should do as a society, and they've taken it from us. The land is ours, but they're never going to give it back as long as we follow anything that they have taught us. So that is the problem.
So what would be your approach? I mean, what would be
my approach would be for us to go back and establish ourselves beyond the Civil War, because your history, according to the Constitution, starts at the Civil War. There's nothing written about you and I before the Civil War.
Well, no, our history started in the 1600s, right?
Yeah, but it's not documented here in the 1600s. That's our concept of where we started, but they don't recognize anything about us until till 1875. Nothing before that. There's nothing that white America acknowledges about us
Well,
before
they,
1875.
well, they do acknowledge us in the writing of the Constitution. They just refer to us as for
Where?
we was a political sense. That's what
Where?
that's what the 3/5 clause was. It was a political because they didn't want the southern states to have so much power because all the slaves
You
were.
think that was not written for us? That was written for the Scottish, the French, the
No, no,
Italians,
no,
the
no,
Jews,
I'm not
and
saying.
everybody else that was not off the Mayflower.
No, I'm not saying that the Constitution that we had any rights under the Constitution. What I'm saying is that the fact that we was acknowledged in the Constitution at all was
Where was he acknowledged?
now this union was they was trying to create a union, right? That's the argument.
Mm-hmm.
This, most of the population was in the slave states, was in the South, where the slaves were.
Yeah.
The people that wanted to create this country based on their parameters, they the one had the pens, they had the guns, they had the control.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want the southern states to have too much power in government that they created.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to get the people to sign it there in Pennsylvania, most of them were southern states. They had to go along with this provision to say, okay, you can count your slave, but you can only count him as 3/5 of a person.
Mm-hmm.
That was all political. Now
it was
go ahead.
It was a political thing. However, when you look at what actually took place, why did the North, why did Abraham Lincoln want to go to war with the South? For one reason. The South was generating so much money. They were generating more money through the use of slaves than the North was generating through manufacturing and commerce, or what they were doing in the North. So in order for the North to stay in charge of this country, they had to eliminate the purpose behind what the South was doing. And in order to slow the South roll, because if they had left the South alone, the South would have been running the entire United States. If they had left them alone with the money they were generating through cotton, through sugar cane, through beans, and all this other stuff they were doing with the bondage of people, they would have been running the entire country, and they were moving north with that movement. So that's why. Why is it that Abraham Lincoln said on the 38 parallel, the Mason-Dixie line, everything below the Mason-Dixie line is what we're concerned with. We don't want y'all to have control of that many people anymore. We're gonna eliminate the ability for you to hold a person hostage and make them work for you for free. We're gonna stop that because y'all making too much money. You're gonna have to pay them. So that's the reason behind it. It's about economics. It's about power. If the North had allowed them to do that, they would be running this country right now, and the whole country would be slave territory or made forced labor territory. Everybody would be working for somebody for free. But because that would eliminate the way they wanted to set up this United States, the 13 colonies. They had to do what they had to do to change it. And in order to change it, they had to eliminate the source of revenue, the source of money that the South had. The South had all these thousands and millions of people working for nothing, and they were reaping in nothing but money. So what did they do? They enlisted the French to help them defeat the South. That's what they did. They brought the French in to defeat the South. They brought the Germans in to defeat the South. They brought the Russians in, not the Russians, but they brought in other countries to help them defeat the South. And that's why when the France went over to Vietnam and tried to beat the Vietnamese and got their butt waxed over there, the U.S. had no other alternative but to join in the fight to pay them back for what they did during the Civil War. That's why the U.S. got into Vietnam, is because of France getting beat down over there and the U.S. owing France a favor for them being able to win the Civil War here on this continent. That's why we went over there. So the whole gist of the whole matter is that it was not about them freeing us. They didn't give a damn about us being slaves. It was about the money being made because we were under bondage and were working for free. That's what the big problem is. If the North still had slaves when they were fighting to get the slaves freed down south.
Well, if that's true, why would that even be a part of addressed in the Constitution? I mean, in the Constitution at all?
Well,
on your theory,
what part you talking about when they said something about
3/5?
slavery?
Yeah,
about 3/5 of a man,
uh-huh.
because it was a political move to try and get them to agree to what the North wanted. They were not going to allow them to use the entire vote for the people that they were holding.
Right, that's what I said. But based on your theory, though, I'm saying that if we're I guess what we're having is two distinct conversations. You know, and it's not a complicated, because I understand what you're saying. You're saying that we should have a conversation separate and apart from the American script, if you will. That there's a script that was written before America came to these shores. And that's the script you're trying to get the listeners to understand.
That script is not our script. We had our own script.
That script is not part of the American script. The people that America brought here as slaves are not part of the script that you're talking about, but they're part of the people that you're talking about.
Right.
And so do we deal with the ones that do we deal with the American script first, or do we deal with?
That's a good question. That's a great question.
I mean,
which script do we take on?
Yeah,
I believe, this is just my belief. I believe, Claude, that the only script we can deal with is our own script, and in other words, correcting our own self. Because we can't correct what they've gotten in place already, not alone. The only way we can correct what they've gotten in place is through numbers. And the problem is we don't have the numbers to correct it, because they have done their best to keep us in small numbers. That's why I wanted to talk about where Black people live, because everywhere you remember the chart we've shown so many times. Everywhere we've made progress, they have made us have to go back down to ground zero and start over. And that's been the problem, because if they had allowed us to grow, we would have been established already. But we can't establish ourselves because they won't allow us to grow. Right. They won't allow us to be who we really are. And if they did allow us to be who we really are, we would end up running our own world. See, I want to put this chart up right quick, because what this shows you right here, Claude, is that everybody on this chart they call it Black massacres. This is where our people flourished. We had big populations of Black people. But every single one of these big populations where we were just like Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Every one of these places were either like Tulsa or greater than Tulsa, or on their way to be greater than Tulsa. And they destroyed these places because of the simple fact they did not want us to establish a foothold anywhere in this country. And if you think about it right now, if you go back and take a look, we do not have a single city where we control a city, an entire city. We don't control it.
Well, okay. Do you mean from an economic control or from a political control?
From a cultural patrol. A culture patrol.
But
don't own. In other words, we don't own the city. We don't have a Black bank. We don't have a Black movie theater, a Black grocery store, Black doctor's office, Black dental offices. We don't have a country, a city like that, but we had that in the 1900s, 1925, 1930. We had that
because we get doing integration.
Mm-hmm. That's what school is.
We integrated. We had integration without negotiation, meaning we gave away everything black for free.
After they took everything first, and then we gave them the rest.
We gave it up for free. Yeah. That was we didn't tell Macy's, okay, if you don't shop at Smith-Bey store, we're not gonna shop at Macy's. We just gave up Smith-Bey.
Yeah, we just gave it up.
But
why did we give it up? Why did we do that?
You know, that's a lingering question. What is it about our
because side? we followed leaders. We followed our leaders. We had several different directions to follow. We had Martin Luther King way to follow, and we had Malcolm X way to follow. Let's just use those two for a second, okay? Let's say we chose, the majority of Americans chose to follow Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King was pushing this nonviolent way of negotiating with white America. But see, this is the two things I will tell you, Claude. Black people are willing to die for what they believe in. Black people are willing to die for what they believe in. White people are willing to kill for what they believe in. See the difference? It's a perfect storm. Black people are willing to die, and white people are willing to kill for what they believe in. And that's exactly what we've done. And Martin Luther King solidified the fact that we are willing to die for what we believe in. But see, Malcolm X's philosophy was Black people are willing to kill for what we believe in. And nobody wanted to fight. We didn't want to fight because we felt like we could negotiate. We felt like we were better than that. And how did they keep us from wanting to fight? By sending us to church.
Let me ask you a question.
What?
You've seen images of the Little Rock 9.
Yes, I have.
So if I say, well, describe Little Rock Central High School, you could describe that, right?
I can try, yeah.
Yes, this big monstrosity. It looks like a college built campus. It's huge, right? But if I ask you to describe the school where them 9 black children would have gone if they couldn't go to Little Rock, ain't nobody never seen that picture. You can't describe it.
No, because it was also a problem. I remember going to elementary school, right?
My point in bringing it up is we elevate whiteness in this country and we devalue blackness, and there's a cost to that. There's a consequence of that. That when you look at the behavior, when you look at some of the behaviors of our children, I mean, there's a cost when you devalue yourself, when society devalues you. And that's what's happening. But I think that we can address that. I think it would be criminal. We missed the negotiation with immigration. We got an opportunity with reparations. We got a chance to atone for those missed opportunities. But we gotta have a collective. Hear me out for a second. We gotta have a collective argument, a collective coming together. We can't have the politicians with this position, the pastors with this position, somebody else over here with this position, like we had back in the fight over integration. We have to learn from those lessons in the past. We need to get reparations and get moving forward in this country. And I think that politically, from a standpoint, we gotta have a couple of majority black states. I mean, I don't see us going anywhere.
Not saying that white folk couldn't live in those states, but
white folks couldn't live
but black folks run in the state.
But we don't say nothing.
Black governors, black mayors, and the majority. Right. That's what you say.
I mean, we don't say nothing about majority
under this Constitution.
Have you ever looked at Wyoming when they have their governor's State of the State speech? Ain't a black person in there. Utah, Nebraska. Nobody questions that. Nobody questions the political nature of that. But mention a black space where blacks are in control, where blacks are the judges and the politicians, majority. I mean,
why we're not there though? Why do you think we're not there?
Because as Reed said in Montgomery, Alabama, he said, "I'm the governor of Montgomery, Alabama." We got black governors in all of the cities. We got him in Birmingham. We got him in Richmond. I mean, mayor. We got him had him in Houston. We got him in Jackson. So we got him in a lot of the black spaces where black folks are the majority. But I'll tell you what Reed said. He said, if I don't take care of these white folks shit, they're going to take their shit and leave my city. We got to get our own shit.
I agree.
We got to become valuable.
Mm-hmm. And we got to start. We got to start zeroing on something.
White folks complain about Detroit, how it went to hell in a handbasket. They want to blame black folks. Well, it's black leadership. It's black folks. No, the white folks in Detroit took their shit and left.
They took that shit and hauled ass. They got out of there. Yeah,
they left
overnight. They didn't do it. They didn't do this shit over years. They did it right away.
So you don't think black mayors learned that lesson? They learned that lesson, man.
So you're saying black people get empowered, the white folks take that shit and leave?
No, I'm saying that in the spaces where black people are elected mayor, their governance is no different than if it was a white mayor, because the people that own the shit, it's just like the founders that wrote the country, the barons stuff that ran the country. It's the same thing now, and so when you hear a white mayor say, "Well, I'm not just the mayor of black folks, I'm the mayor of everybody," white politicians don't have to say that.
No, they don't.
You know,
but black people do. Even the black vice president did.
We got a political structure. This government created majority-minority districts, right? Mm-hmm. Which basically diluted the power of black folks. Because a majority-minority district, the only places where a majority district is majority black is in the South. Anywhere else, that's why in California, you got majority-minority districts that are Asian, that are Hispanics. Same thing in Texas. Because they're not majority black districts. And the places, why you think we got to support all these programs? Why you think we got to support all these other different programs that are detrimental to our advancement in this country? Yeah,
we do. I'll tell you why we're in this condition we're in, Claude. And this is just an opinion, and I'll say it till the cows come home. The only reason we're in this position is because we're relying on the governance of their system. The moment we rely on our own governance and start figuring out how to work it in one direction as a people, then we can change it. But we can't change it becoming property all over again. Everything that's been set up has been done systematically over the last 200 years. They have done the best plan ever.
But Atlanta figured it out. When Maynard Jackson was elected in the 70s,
Atlanta may look good, but it's still white on.
But Atlanta got more black business millionaires. Atlanta got more black businesses. Atlanta got
still white.
I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying, but Atlanta.
What color is the governor?
Well, yeah, but Georgia is also the first state that almost that elected a Democratic nominee, Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, but almost ain't no damn win.
They got close.
Second place ain't no win.
But they got close.
Yeah, you can get close. Ain't no cigar.
I'm just saying
that you want to.
That when you got real political leadership, like Maynard
they
Jackson,
already know they're gonna let you get close. They're gonna let you almost win, but they're gonna keep you in second place as long as you follow in their political system.
But brother, I mean, it's just like Mississippi, right? You got state boundaries of Mississippi, right? I mean, in the United States, is 50 of those kind of boundaries, right?
Right.
So Mississippi is a little bit boundaries. What goes on in Mississippi's boundaries is a little bit differently than what goes on in New York's boundaries or California boundaries. So we need, wherever those black majority states are, whatever boundary states they become, they're gonna operate within those boundaries. So within those boundaries, it's gonna be better for the black people in Mississippi than it's gonna be for Alabama that don't have a majority black population. So within those boundaries,
let's say, like you say, Mississippi, right? All right, Mississippi got majority black people there, but the black people in Mississippi, they like I say, over the last couple of hundred years, they systematically made it so people don't qualify to fit the requirements of their system. Just like they've said, how many gumballs in that jar for you to vote? If you can't guess the number of gumballs in that jar, you can't register to vote. So it's not that anymore, but it's more complicated. It's more diplomatic. It's more politically correct now, but it's the same thing.
But you put 25 to 50,000 more black families in Mississippi, and see, don't that dynamic change?
But you can only put families in there that's going to make the difference. But see, when you up the ante like that, right? Like you just saying 50,000 more, what you think they're going to do? They're going to up the ante too. They're going to bring in the state troopers, the highway patrols, the local police, the Capitol Police, like they did in Jackson, Mississippi. When Jackson local police started, they brought in the Capitol Police into Jackson, Mississippi, because that Jackson, Mississippi was getting too much power, or as they were concerned. Huh?
But they run the state government. I'm saying that I'm talking about a transformation of Mississippi state government to where you don't have a majority white state government.
In 1929, Mississippi was the first state in the country to elect more than 20 black officials in government. That only lasted one term.
Right.
That never happened again. Never happened again.
I'm just saying.
Why? Because we done screwed up somewhere. Let's fix this shit. So they fixed it by criminalizing black people, by putting records on black people, by putting court dates on black people, and not giving them the privilege of having the opportunity to vote. They fixed it. And that's why I say, as long as we follow their doctrine, we're not going to win. That's why I keep telling you, we got a nationality problem here. And that's where we're going to always lose as long as we follow their doctrine.
How is the nationality paradigm?
Yeah, the nationality problem is you are following a doctrine that you are destined for second-class citizen. So you can be nothing more than a second-class citizen in America.
I've watched Moors get pulled over by the police.
Mm-hmm. That ain't about what it's about. That ain't what it's about.
So even if we transform based on what you say, tell me how that works. How that's going to change America.
All right. First of all, right now, when you're born, you have 15 days to get a birth certificate.
But okay, but using Mississippi as an example.
That's every state. I'm going to take you through how.
Now let's use Mississippi.
All right, Mississippi. You have 15 days to get a birth certificate. If you don't get that birth certificate, it is a felony offense for you to have that child in that state without a birth certificate. Now, so you have to get the birth certificate. But what the birth certificate does is gives the state, only the state of Mississippi, the authority to govern and regulate your child. In other words, saying your child must have these immunizations. Your child must go to 12 years of school. Your child must do this. Your child must have this. You can't abuse this child, because if you do, we'll take it away. Because we can send the child protective services over there and take your kid if we want to. Now, that's what the birth certificate does for you. Now, for the state. But in order to change that, you have to do what they call authenticate your birth certificate. Once you authenticate your birth certificate with the state, that tells the state that, hey, I no longer want to be represented by your parentship. I'm no longer your child.
So a person a person that needs Medicaid under that scenario, would they be eligible in the state?
Yes, you still can get Medicaid. Nothing changes other than your particular status. Your
So
status
you're a
changed from
U.S. citizen.
you still not that has not that won't change your citizenship or anything. Only thing it changes is you become a living person rather than a commodity. As a birth certificate only, what do you think they call it when you put money in the bank? A certificate of deposit, right? That's all you are. A certificate of deposit to the state when you do a birth certificate.
But every more I've seen pulled over got a whole bunch of paperwork.
You let me keep going. So now you have authenticated yourself saying that you're no longer an entity, but you're a living person. So a living person has rights, not privileges. As a entity, you only have privileges. As a person, you have rights. So now the Constitution applies to you. Right now, if you're a certificate of birth to a state, then you are not considered a person. You're considered an entity. You're not a living person. But you have to understand the construct of the United States of America. Anything, if you even did an LLC, right? Everything you wanted to do, let's say you got an LLC for consulting and you wanted to open an LLC for voter registration. I'm just using that as an example. That LLC for voter registration belongs to who? Belongs to you as the consulting LLC. You did a DBA as a voter registration. That DBA belongs to you. You have the right to enact that DBA or cancel that DBA because you are the LLC. So the state is the LLC for every DBA, which is every person that's born in that state. Mm-hmm. That birth certificate is nothing more than creating a DBA for that state. That's right. Why they give you, they call it certificates. They don't call it living birth. Now there's another document. Once you transfer from the birth certificate, you receive what they call a certificate of live birth. Mm-hmm. And that live birth certificate is what you are, makes you a person. Mm-hmm. But the birth certificate only makes you an entity. So now you're a citizen. You're an official citizen. The Constitution applies to a living person. So the next step, what did that say?
LLC.
Yeah. So you can create a DBA under that and it belongs to you. Mm-hmm. It's yours. Same with the state. Every state is an LLC or a corporation, S Corp or C Corp. Mm-hmm. And they belong to everything born in that state belongs to them. And that gives the state the right to say no other state can govern you because you belong to this state.
But I guess help me understand though.
So you got that part.
So the federal government would recognize what you're saying.
Absolutely. So now you have to do it at the same thing. You send that authentication you got from the state. Now you forward that to the Department of Interior, who now gives you a federal living birth certificate. In other words, you no longer a commodity for the federal government. You become a living person for the federal government.
So how does that differ from the state government?
The state government, when you do an authentication for the state government, it authenticates you to be a living person for the state. You're not a living person for the rest of the states. You're only for that particular state, you're a living person. But now that you do the federal authentication, that gives you authentication for the country, not just the state. You for all the states that belong to that country. When any state you go to, you're considered a living person, not a commodity. If you don't authenticate with the federal government, you're only a living person in that state.
Huh? Part of the Constitution is the fact that one state recognizes the rights and privileges of all the other states.
They recognize it, yes.
So if they do, in Mississippi, your citizenship don't go away when you go to Alabama.
No, it doesn't.
Louisiana.
It's a different category. You're rated
because you're a U.S. citizen.
No, you're not. You as a black As us, as descendants of slaves, we're not citizens, brother. The Constitution itself said all men are created equal. So when the base writing of the Constitution say all men are created equal, and then further down it says you get 3/5 or 2/5 or whatever as a vote. That how can you can't distinguish? You can't distinguish that.
But I make distinction between a political
that gives ambiguity. That gives room. That gives room for maneuverability. That gives the white man room to further screw the system if he wants to.
No,
that's all it does. It ain't for us; it's for them.
But the 3/5 clause was so that the Southerners wouldn't have wouldn't have so much power. That was what the 3/5 clause was about.
That was an appeasement. That had no significance whatsoever. That was an appeasement.
It was a political appeasement. So
how did you count slaves anyway? According to them, now you couldn't. If I'm a white man, I can say I got 100 slaves, right? But I can say I got 200 slaves. So you're gonna give me 200, 3/5 of a vote? You don't know how many slaves I got. So it was just an appeasement. It didn't amount to nothing. It still ended up in the Civil War because it was just a way to get them to move to the next level. You had to give some to get some.
It was a way for them to get the South to sign on to the Constitution.
That's it. That's all it was. It didn't mean it had no bearing on anything whatsoever. That 3/5 of a man thing. It had no bearing. Because
I agree with you there. The context of humanity, in that context, it was all about politics.
And we cannot count ourselves as slaves. We were not. I always go back to Kunta Kinte. Why was Kunta Kinte getting beat up all the time? Because he would not stop being called. He would not stop calling himself Kunta Kinte. He would not stop practicing his own religion. They would whoop him every time they caught him. And why was he beat almost to death? Because he would not give up his name. Because as long as he held on to his name, what is he holding on to? His nationality, his heritage, his origin. But see, in order for the white man to put you in the condition that he got us in right now, he had to take that away from you.
Right.
So why would you allow that man to take your soul? He took our soul. In other words, let's use it in today's context. The white man comes along and say, in order for you to get this job, you're gonna have to denounce and separate yourself from your parent, and you are no longer. You can never mention your parent again. You can never call your parent again. You can never talk to your parent again. And you're gonna say, no, I ain't doing that. But then they're gonna beat the shit out of you until you do, and you ain't got no choice but to say, all right, I'll never talk to my mom again. I'll never talk to my dad again, so I can be what you want me to be, Mr. Billy. So that's what's happening. They want you to be what they want you to be, so you can't acknowledge where you came from, who raised you. You can't acknowledge who raised you anymore. You can't acknowledge your mother and your father anymore because you work for me now. So forget about them. You are out. You belong to me. So that's what it was about. And so Kunta Kinte had to relinquish his heritage, his mother and father.
So say we do all that, then what do we have?
It's done. It was done.
I mean, say that becomes everything that you just described, that we do that as a people.
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
Then we start out with, we already have what we call a nation within a nation as a Moor. The Moor nation never went away. It's always been here, but it's been so small and unrecognized because the federal government refused to recognize it. They would much rather an individual abuse a Moor's rights than to allow it to be recognized. They would rather pay the fine. They would rather pay the fine.
Are there any more elected officials?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are, but I don't know any. But the Moor has its own nation within a nation. So if you just look at it this way, in 1929, Noble Drew Ali formed.
I know a lot of our listeners, if they could be listen, they'd be asking you this question.
Mm-hmm. Come on.
Well, within the parameters of the United States, where's the Moor population at? I mean, where are the Moors? Where are they?
The national headquarters is in Baltimore, Maryland, for the Moorish Science Temple number 13 in Baltimore, Maryland. But there are temple. It was moved to Chicago by Noble Drew Ali in 1929, where he formed the actual organization of the Nation of the Moors, and he formed this in like September 1929, and the Vatican formed theirs in like October, November 1929. So in other words, the Vatican formed theirs based on what Noble Drew Ali did through the United States. So the Vatican formed theirs through the United States too.
So in Baltimore, what's in Baltimore?
The national headquarters for the Moorish Science Divine Temple number 13. That's what's in Baltimore. That's the headquarters for the Moorish set that I belong to. But there are temples in Chicago. There are temples all in other places. I just know Chicago in here.
Is there a temple in Texas?
No.
Is there a temple in any of the?
Like I said, I don't know where there are. I couldn't tell you where they are temples. I just know where I go, which is my headquarters is in Baltimore, Maryland. My objective for me becoming a Moor is to establish a temple here in Texas. That's my objective. And I'm not going to do that without having the support that I need from them. In order for us to have the support from them, we got to have at least 30,000 members. And I'm sure there's about 15 to 20,000 members, but you cannot form a political party with the federal government without 30,000 signed members. And those signed members for a nation has to be registered with the Department of Interior. And that's where we are now.
Why would the Department of Interior?
Because they govern how many people from other nations can be brought to this country.
So more U.S. citizens?
Yes, you have dual citizenship, U.S. citizen and Moorish citizenship.
So you don't have to register. So if you have a child, can you just register him as a Moor?
Yes, you're going to register them as a dual citizen. You're still going to follow the law. You got to follow the law of the country that you're within.
How come Moors say they don't need a driver's license when they're pulled over by the state?
But you don't. You no longer. You're required to do what's certain things like a birth certificate. You still have to do that, but you have ways to get around certain things. You have ways to not have a driver's license. You have ways to not have insurance. You have ways to do other things in the country that most people can't do. And you like I told you before, you have several levels of citizenship. Just because you're considered a citizen, it doesn't mean you have rights. You can be like, if you're naturalized, look how he can just take a naturalized person and kick them out the country. You don't have rights as a naturalized person. You have privileges. The only way you have rights in the United States is to be an official citizen of another nation or a citizen of this country. And you are not a citizen of the United States as long as you're not authenticated. You're still property of a state. That's what you are. You have to get yourself authenticated.
Is that only for Black people or is that everybody?
I have no idea about everybody, but I can specifically tell you about Black people.
So
we are not, that's why we're not Black. We're not Black. We're not African American. We're not colored. We're not Indian. We are Moor. We're Asiatic, to be honest with you. We're Asiatic Moors. That's who we are. Because there's only two races, Europeans, Eurasian, and Asiatic. We are Asiatic.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just I hear
And
what
if
you're saying.
and let me give you this part too. If you really wanted to know what the word black means, black will, if you did the extensive research on the word black, it's going to lead you to white, the Europeans, the Eurasians. They're the black people. I'm just saying, you have to really dig
I
deep.
heard that's the opposite.
That they're the black people. If you really did the research, it takes a lot of research to get to what black really means, and you'll see who the black people really are. But we are labeled as black. How did we get the term black anyway? How did we get the term Negro? I mean, when they brought us over, we were. Africa is not the name of It's I got it in my mind. I can't say it. Ikobalon or something. Ikobalon. I can't think of it. But whatever it is, we're not considered. We're not African. How can you separate a person from their nationality without taking it from them? They had to take it from us. Can you just picture you not being connected to your grandmother and your grandfather and your mother and your father and your great-great-grandmother and your great-great-grandfather? Can you picture you being severed from that lineage that you know in your mind right now? You physically know it. How can you no longer be Claude Foster? How can you be who I'm going to call you, Johnny? You no longer Claude Foster. Your name is Johnny. Can I just walk up to you and make that happen for you? Ain't no way in hell. Ain't no way in heaven either that I can come up to you and take your name from you. But that's what they did to our people. And so we're just descendants of those people who lost all of that. Now the connection is the Moors' objective is to reconnect you, Claude, and the rest of our black brothers and sisters out there to the people that they were disconnected from. And if you don't ever reconnect to your ancestors, then you've broken the lineage, you've broken the tie. And no, you cannot start your legacy from after the Civil War and forward. Your legacy goes 1,000 years back. How are you going to forget all about that? You're part of Boaz, Ruth. You're part of Muhammad. You're part of all these people that are characters in the Bible that are spoken about today that all are black.
I get that part,
but you don't not connected right now.
No, but what we be like I say, I'm on the show from a political perspective, so I'm talking about I think sometimes that's why we're talking about the same thing, but we're talking about it from a different perspective.
Yeah,
I'm talking about it from the political structure that we are in America. Mm-hmm. You've gone outside of America. You've gone further back than I have the expertise to go. So it's hard for me to counter what, and I would never counter what you're saying. I'm just saying I don't have the expertise to have a viable discussion because my scope on the show was about black politics. And the Constitution is a political document in which all politics stem. So I go back to the 1600s because that's kind of what I'm on the show to talk about, the politics. Mm-hmm. And so what you're talking about is way. It's important, but it's heavy. And I just don't have the bandwidth to go that way.
It's heavy.
I don't have the bandwidth. But I can talk.
All right. So back to reparations and what we were initially talking about. We want that, but there were some items. I mean, when you said people want money.
I think like I was telling you, I think one of the things, and then again, I'm talking about within the borders of the construct of where we are as Black Americans. Mm. We have Black media in 31 states out of 50. That means 19 states, from a Black perspective, we don't have a voice, be it verbal or written. But in 31 states, we got some form of Black media, either a newspaper or digest, and then we got the national press that covers all of America.
Mhm.
And it just amazes me how we can't understand some of these issues. I mean, what our press needs to do a better job of articulating these issues.
So why doesn't the NAACP do more to bring us home to what we need to pay
Because
attention
the
to?
NAACP is a political organization. The NAACP with probably 500,000 members, but their bark is probably oftentimes bigger than their bite. You know, the NAACP, like my boss used to say, is like a bulldog, you know, rather than a
Behind the
chihuahua.
fence.
But what I'm saying is, I mean, you know, when you look at the NAACP, when you look at the NAACP and the leadership of the NAACP here, including your great state of Mississippi, a lot of the NAACP leaders have done some great things elevating this political discussion, this political aspect. That's why I'm a member.
Me too. I'm a member too.
For the political aspects of it, because it tries to make the limits of America equal for all.
And that's where we fall short every time we start talking about for all.
But the American descendant of a slave, ADOS, you know, I think we can never make Black people whole in America until we address this reparations issue. Until we address that and trying to get all the Black infrastructure on the same page. We're not all on the same page. The politicians, the clergy, the thought leaders, and everybody on the same.
So can we just start with the clergy? I mean, we got what 34,000 Black churches here.
You talking about the guy that just tried to that kind of clergy? He believes in reparations.
How can we get the clergy to all do something together? I mean, we can't get a city of all the Black churches to do one thing. I mean, why won't all the Black churches pull together in one city, in one county?
And maybe that's a test that needs to, you know, everything requires leadership. You know, I got a lot of, I mean, the young people that's coming up, I got a lot of faith in them. I mean, they're focusing on some of the issues that.
What's a good start though? Where could we start that? I mean, what if we had one agenda to go out and start preaching, what would it be?
Well, like for me, and the agenda that I'm going to preach is reparations. I think that's a start. I think in a country like America that was built on the backs of slaves, that the reason why America is great is because America got money, got capacity, and you know, so
a big defense budget.
Yeah, but what 900 billion, almost $1 trillion.
That's a lot of money for the defense budget, man. Yeah,
and it's an agency that's never been audited, so they got money just flying out the window.
You don't know which way it's going. That if you want to decrease something, decrease the people that work in the Pentagon.
Well, that's what Trump said he's gonna do, but you better not say that too loud. You know? You know? But what I'm saying is, I really think that as Black Americans, I think we can come together on this
on reparations.
Yeah, I think that you know, whether it's the civil rights organizations, the Black press, if we could just get the Black press on one voice, if we could just get the Black press on one message, on one voice, I think that would.
But we got to realize that reparations ain't money. What we want to focus on, we want to focus on all the benefits that we can put on one packet for people that are descendants of slaves. So some of the things could be like what, you know, you're not required to pay for driver's license. You're not required to pay property taxes. You're not required to what?
That's too,
pay for college.
Wouldn't that be too drawn out? Americans like specifics, you know. Like
those are specific. I mean, you have to qualify to not pay for your driver's license. You have to qualify as a descendant of a slave to not pay taxes, and you have to qualify for a descendant of slave to not have to do anything else that we could do as in a reparations package. Now that does not exclude money. I mean, you still should receive a substantial amount of funding because your ancestors earned it
I'm
and
not
you
giving
were never paid for it.
like the Homestead Act. How much did the whites get in free land? What was the value of the free land whites got in the Homestead Act?
But yeah, they were giving away that free land, but they were not giving it to black people at the same time.
But Dr. King talked about it. He talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so that it can come in different ways. You know, like I say, but I think until we address that elephant in the room, I don't think that we'll ever move forward in this country in terms of
okay. Yeah, I'm gonna make a statement on this reparation thing, but go ahead and start thinking about your closing statement after I say this, and we'll go from there. But as far as reparations, man, I think that's a beautiful idea. But every time you want to mention reparations to anybody, that smirk on their face makes you want to slap the shit out of them because they think it's a bunch of bull crap, and nobody believes that we are due that. They thinking we should just get over what happened to our ancestors and move forward. Yeah, I'm moving forward, whether you like it or not, but I ain't forgetting what the hell you owe me. It's almost like you want me to just forgive your debt. You have a debt to our culture and a debt to our people, and you damn well better be ready to pay it. You done paid every other nationality their reparations. And the only reason we have not received our reparations is because we don't have a nationality. And we've never pursued bringing together a nationality for descendants of slaves. And I can fuss this and fight about this all my life until somebody hear it, but it seems like it falls on deaf ears. The only way we're going to get this started is if there's something solid like a nationality of a core of people. Descendants of slaves have a nationality. We just ain't put it on paper. We don't make it known that we have one. And until we make it known, it'll never get us reparations. That's the step one. Everybody that's got them already had a nationality, except we don't have one. And that's why we haven't been paid. And we are never going to get paid until we take care of base one first. We can't get third base until we get through first. Go ahead, Claude.
Well, brother, I think we agree on first base and second base.
Yeah.
I do think we agree on identity. I think that's important, but I think reparations is important. And I think so we agree on first and second base, but I think in order to get the third, we got to come together and trying to figure out how we come together and how we educate and process coming together. I think that's the challenge. Out of all the states with black media within the state, Texas leads with over 20 black media outlets. So if the majority of black folks are in 86 counties out of 260 some counties, that means there are 20 media outlets in those 80 that cover those 87 counties where most of the black folks are. So you would think that Texas would be an easy place to educate, to mobilize, to inform. But it's just the opposite. It's because of the size, it's more difficult. You know, it's kind of like almost back when slaves found out that they were free. I mean, you know, it takes a while because Texas is so big. But I think our show and talking about these issues and laying these issues out for the folks to hear, I think that goes a long way in us spreading that word. So again, I appreciate everything that's been said today, and I hope our listeners do too.
I want to say thank you to our friend and co-host, Mr. Claude Foster. He's the founder of CGA Consulting Group, And I thank him for being a part of the Black News Network today. And until next week, Mr. Claude, I will see you then. So thanks for your input, and hopefully our listeners thank you too.
Peace out.
Right. You too. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Black News Network, the real voice of Black USA, broadcasting every Sunday at 3:30 p.m. You can find us on Facebook live at BNN 247, and again on YouTube doing the same thing, BNN 247. Our objective here is to bring you the news from a Black perspective. We don't own the rights to the music, but we do own the rights to what we say. Now, if you have a topic that you enjoy talking about, you can always contact me at 210-872-2261, or you can email me at smithwj2488@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Look forward to seeing you next Sunday, same time, same place, 3:30 p.m. on the Black News Network. Now we want to change the name to the Black News and Information Network, because we are here to inform our people about what's going on in our country. Take care.